The midnight air does not merely grow cold. It suffocates. In the pitch black of an ancient Judean wasteland, the silence is suddenly ripped apart by a raw, echoing screech. The bridegroom is here. Come out to meet him. Instantly, the darkness fractures into panic. Heavy breathing, the frantic scraping of flint against stone, and the desperate, coughing sputter of dying flames fill the night. 5 women look down in horror as the wicks of their torches curl into black ash, choking on the last microscopic drops of fuel. Their light is dying, and the grand procession is already moving, desperation turning into sheer terror. They turn to the other 5 women whose torches pierce the night like brilliant, unwavering stars. They stretch out their trembling, empty hands and plead,
"Give us some of your oil. Our lamps are going out."
Then comes the blow that history never saw coming. The 5 women with the burning torches do not reach out in comfort. They do not share. Instead, they step backward into the light, look directly into the eyes of their frantic companions, and deliver an icy, unyielding ultimatum.
"No, there will not be enough for us and for you. Go to the merchants and buy for yourselves."
To the modern mind, this response is a moral car crash. We have been conditioned by centuries of ethical teaching to believe that absolute selflessness is the pinnacle of virtue. We are told that a good person always divides their bread, always shares their cloak, and always sacrifices their own well-being for the survival of the group. Yet, in this pivotal cosmic courtroom, the text does something deeply uncomfortable. It does not condemn the refusal. It crowns it as wisdom. To truly understand this shocking turn of events, one must strip away centuries of Western romanticism and look at the brutal, mathematical reality of the ancient Near Eastern wedding. These were not small, domestic lamps. They were heavy wooden torches wrapped in layers of oil-soaked rags. They were designed to burn with a fierce, ravenous hunger, devouring fuel within minutes. The math of the night was absolute and unforgiving. To divide the oil was not an act of charity. It was an act of mutual destruction. Had the wise women surrendered a single flask, every single torch would have plunged into darkness long before the bridegroom reached the courtyard. The entire procession would have collapsed into chaos. The ceremony would have been aborted, and the darkness would have claimed a total victory. This is the jarring introduction to a concept that modern spirituality desperately tries to ignore: the holy necessity of boundaries. The refusal witnessed in the midnight dark was not born out of malice, spite, or a lack of empathy. It was born out of an absolute, unwavering alignment with purpose. There are moments in the human journey where a crisis is manufactured entirely by someone else's chronic negligence. And in those moments, echoing their panic is an insult to your own calling. The 5 wise women understood a terrifying truth that we routinely forget, sometimes. Saying an uncompromising no to another person's self-inflicted emergency is the only legitimate way to say yes to the destiny you were uniquely created to fulfill. To gaze into the dying embers of the 5 failed torches is to confront a deeper, more unsettling mystery. Why could the oil not be shared? Even if the mathematical reality meant a shorter, dimmer light for all, surely a desperate gamble at collective survival would match the conventional definition of mercy. But the restriction was not merely a matter of physical volume. It was an absolute law of metaphysics. To truly understand why the request was denied, one must look past the physical liquid sloshing inside those ancient terracotta flasks and decipher the hidden currency of the soul. In the ancient world, oil was not a cheap commodity easily pulled from a shelf. It was the end product of a grueling, agonizing process. Olive trees had to be cultivated for years, their fruit harvested by hand, beaten, crushed under massive stone wheels, and subjected to immense, bone-shattering pressure in the dark of the olive press, the Gethsemane. Only after this intense crushing did the pure, golden fluid emerge, capable of standing between a human being and the consuming darkness. Therefore, in the divine anatomy of this parable, the oil represents something deeply personal and utterly non-negotiable. It is your history with the divine. It is the stamina quieted and built in the hidden chambers of your life, the integrity forged in the furnace of unspoken trials, the wisdom harvested from your deepest griefs, and the hard-earned convictions of an authentic inner life. It is the spiritual capital accumulated when no one else was watching. And here lies the unvarnished, eternal truth that echoes across the centuries. Character cannot be audited, and transformation cannot be outsourced. The world operates on the concept of transaction. We live in a society built on the ease of borrowing. We borrow capital. We stream someone else's music. We parrot another person's intellectual breakthroughs. And we masquerade behind the curated identities of others. But when the clock strikes midnight and a monumental crisis arrives, this illusion of shared equity completely evaporates. When a life-shattering diagnosis lands on the table, when a sudden tragedy threatens to dismantle your psychological stability, or when you ultimately stand before the final, cosmic tribunal, the law of internal transformation asserts itself with absolute authority. In those defining moments, you cannot survive on the fumes of your spouse's devotion. You cannot illuminate your path using the reserve tank of your mother's prayers. You cannot pass the ultimate test of endurance based on the hours your mentor spent agonizing in the secret place. The 5 wise women could not pour their oil into the empty vessels of their companions because you cannot transfer a scar. You cannot gift someone the resilience that only comes from being broken and put back together. I can offer you my companionship through the valley of the shadow. I can lend you my counsel, and I can weep with you in the dark. But I cannot give you my eyes to see the light. The oil of the Spirit is minted exclusively in the private press of personal accountability, and its ownership is absolute. Empathy has its limits. It can walk you to the edge of the fire, but it cannot burn for you. To study the 5 who were left behind is not to examine a portrait of malicious wickedness, but to witness the slow, silent tragedy of spiritual parasitism. These were not external enemies trying to tear down the wedding gates. They wore the correct linen, carried the traditional instruments, and spoke the accepted language of the bridal party. Their failure was far more insidious, hidden beneath the comforting veneer of proximity. They mistakenly believed that being part of the crowd was identical to being prepared for the crisis. This is the psychological trap of the borrowed environment. In the daylight hours, it is remarkably easy to confuse connection with transformation. A person can sit in the grandest cathedrals, consume the most profound literature, and surround themselves with deeply disciplined minds, all while their own internal reservoir remains entirely dry. The 5 foolish companions coasted on the momentum of their peers. Because the wise were ready, the foolish assumed the entire collective was secure. They lived under the dangerous illusion that when the shadows lengthened, the radiance of those standing next to them would be enough to cover their own emptiness. But time is an uncompromising auditor. The lit torch of the early evening requires no deep reservoir. It burns briefly on the surface oil of initial enthusiasm. It is only the delay, the long, agonizing hours between the expectation and the reality, that tests the depth of the vessel. When the midnight cry finally shatters the silence, the superficial wick burns through its immediate fuel and begins to smoke, exposing the hollow void beneath. The illusion of safety dissolves instantly when the environment stops providing the energy you refuse to cultivate within yourself. The true weight of this tragedy unfolds when the frantic search for external fuel ends in failure. Having scrambled through the dark to find merchants who could sell them what they should have dug for in the quiet years, the 5 return to the banqueting house. They hammer against the heavy timber of the sealed doors, their voices strained with the sudden realization of their exclusion.
Lord, Lord, open to us.
Yet, the voice that answers from behind the barrier carries no anger, only the cold finality of an absolute truth. Truly I tell you, I do not know you. To Western ears, this sounds like a harsh, emotional rejection, but in the original ancient text, the word utilized is ginosko, a term denoting profound, experiential intimacy and shared history. The master of the house was not claiming memory failure. He was stating a relational fact. There was no thread of authentic connection binding them together. They had loved the idea of the festival. They had desired the status of the invitation. And they had leaned heavily on the efforts of the wise. But they had never spent the quiet, lonely hours building a direct, unmediated relationship with the bridegroom. They were spiritual hitchhikers, caught in the ultimate modern nightmare, standing before the gate of their highest aspiration only to realize that their cosmic passport belongs to someone else. Buried within the ancient text lies a solitary, profound detail that completely dismantles the rigid fortress of modern legalism. In the 5th verse of the record, a quiet truth is laid bare. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. Not a select few, not merely the careless or the distracted. Everyone, the wise and the foolish alike, surrendered to the heavy, gravitational pull of exhaustion. Their eyes grew heavy, their heads bowed, and they sank into the silent equalizer of sleep. This single line offers an immense wave of psychological relief to anyone navigating the complexities of human endurance. It shatters the unrealistic, perfectionist dogma that to be strong, spiritually mature, or emotionally resilient, you must never feel weary, never encounter doubt, and never succumb to the weight of mental fatigue. The dark night of delay spares no one. Chronic exhaustion is an inescapable element of the human condition. Therefore, the grand dividing line between the two groups was not their ability to stubbornly resist sleep, nor was it the absence of human frailty. The true divergence lay entirely in what was happening beneath the surface while they were unconscious. The wise could afford the luxury of rest because their invisible margins were secure. They had already endured the unglamorous, solitary labor of filling their auxiliary vessels in the daylight hours. Their rest was not an act of negligence. It was an act of profound trust backed by prior preparation. The foolish, conversely, slept upon a hollow foundation, mistaking the calm of the delay for the permanent absence of danger. When the midnight alarm finally pierces the silence, it acts as a brutal catalyst of truth. A crisis never manufactures character. It merely acts as a mirror, instantly reflecting the exact contents of your reservoir. The sudden arrival of a life-altering event does not grant you new strength. It simply exposes the precise volume of stamina you chose to accumulate before the lights went out. When that piercing shout echoed through the camp, the wise did not need to scramble, bargain, or engage in a frantic, undignified hustle. They did not have to manufacture a persona or summon an artificial resilience, because the work had already been completed in the quiet years. Their awakening was a transition of absolute grace. They simply stood up, trimmed their wicks, poured the golden fluid from their reserves, and walked confidently into the night. Their quiet preparation spoke for them with terrifying eloquence at a time when their voices were silent and their eyes were closed. The grand, sweeping narrative of Matthew 25 does not culminate in a call to fear, but in a radical invitation to individual sovereignty and absolute internal responsibility. It forces a complete resolution of the tension between the wise and the foolish, leaving no room for ambiguity. The closed door of the banqueting house stands as a monument to an unalterable law of existence. The light you walk by must be your own. To survive the inevitable midnights of the human journey, you must master the delicate, essential discipline of filling your own flask, and you must possess the courage to protect it. This is the ultimate integration of the parable's hidden theme, the sacred necessity of boundaries. You are not doing the world a favor by allowing your emotional, mental, and spiritual energy to be chronically plundered by those who refuse to engage in their own inner labor. Enabling another person's perpetual negligence does not rescue them from the dark. It merely guarantees that both of you will be bankrupt when the reckoning arrives. True love is not codependency. It is maintaining enough light to show others that a path exists, even if they must buy their own fuel to walk it. The time for spiritual hitchhiking has reached its absolute end. You can no longer afford to rely on the collective momentum of your social circles, the inherited convictions of your family, or the curated inspiration of an online feed to keep your torch ignited. The environment will not sustain you forever. Therefore, let the quiet, unglamorous work begin today. In the hours when no one is watching and the world is distracted, settle your deepest convictions before the tempest arrives. Choose the painful, beautiful process of crushing the olives in the secret place of your own life, extracting the pure oil of character, resilience, and authentic connection with the truth. When the final curtain falls, when the grand delay terminates, and the long-awaited footsteps of the bridegroom echo through the courtyard, the crowd will dissolve into nothingness. The ambient noise of society will go dead quiet. Your mentors will be silent, and your companions will stand alone. It will be just you, the vessel in your hands, and the depth of the fluid you chose to accumulate. When that midnight cry shatters the silence of your life, let it find you calm, Prepared and anchored, look down at your hands. Take a deep breath and ensure that your flame does not merely sputter in the dark. Fill your flask today.